Good evening and welcome to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen Workshop. First, we will have the Citizens Forum. Each person that comes up, please state your name and address for the record. You will have 3 minutes to speak to the board. First up, we have Tomer Miniskin. Apologies.
I lived in Laverne for 14 years. I still own my house. I don't live in Laverne anymore, but I do have my office and business over here. I do want to speak about the sprinkler system. I do have a major concern about it because I'm a big believer if we don't have a problem, we don't need a solution. We mentioned in the last meeting, specifically Alderman Church mentioned Nolensville as our sister city that they had the sprinkler system, which is correct. I did build over there. Laverne has 3 fire stations. Nolensville only has 1. But the big difference is that their only 1 fire station is manned with volunteers. So you have professional ones versus volunteers, 1 station versus 3. Another issue that Mr. Church mentioned in that same meeting, he mentioned a dangerous response time, but then he said that the response time was between 2.5 minutes to 3 minutes. I think that's a great response time if you can get to a fire within 2.5 to 3 minutes. I also don't believe that we have a fire issue in the city of Laverne. If we did have a fire issue, maybe that's something that we should discuss. Former Chief Matthews in that same meeting, and I watched the video because the forum was closed because of the COVID-19, at 19 minutes and 30 seconds, he mentioned that we never had such an ordinance, and that is somewhat incorrect because townhomes actually did have a sprinkler system, and that was 2 administrations away. And as one that actually installed it in units and actually owned a few of them later as rentals, I can tell you that that was a big mistake because those units actually ended up costing about 5% more, and 5% sounds like a small number, but when we're dealing with first-time home buyers, it's a big difference, and it became unaffordable, and that's how we ended up keeping those units as rentals. We did have issues, unfortunately, with the sprinkler system. These things do fail. You put a lot of pressure over your head. You have a system of gaskets, rubber gaskets. They do dry up, and they do leak, and when you're talking about high pressure, they leak, and then they burst. Going back to Nolensville, I built over there and I saw the result of bursting pipes. I did make a copy of an article that was in a Tennessean in 2014. I made 6 copies over here so you all can review. The main issue is freezing pipes. When we run the pipes, we run them mostly in the attic. The temperature drops in the attic, even though we try to create a tent system, putting insulation above them, but it's enough that one of the tenants or homeowners or someone goes in the attic and kicks one of the bats in the attic. And okay, may I have another 30 seconds? I'm just going to read an excerpt over here, and this is from Don Schwartz, Nolensville town engineer. He says that he had between 10 to 20 homes that froze and busted, and probably more. And his response was, "It's a mess here." Franklin Fire Department, which averages 17 calls a day, had 65 calls a day on Tuesday and 49 calls on Wednesday, and this is on burst pipes. You're talking about flooded homes. I've seen it with my own eyes. A former engineer of the city of Laverne, Steve Mishu, him himself, he had his house flood. I saw him as well. So bad idea from experience. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Just 1 minute. We're going to clean the lectern. Next up will be Mr. Kevin Woodward.
David's wife has taught him well, hasn't she?
Thank you. My name is Kevin Woodward. I reside at 2101 Sherbrooke Lane. I'm here on behalf of the Home Builders Association of Central Tennessee, which includes Rutherford County, the Home Builders Association of Tennessee, and the National Association of Home Builders. We're against, obviously, sprinklers, but for some time, it's not for what a lot of people think. We're definitely regarding life safety, and we refer to the report that was done by the University of Tennessee several years ago that indicated sprinklers do not save lives, smoke alarms save lives. And they also indicated in that report that the sprinklers save the property, but they do not save lives. To kind of echo what the other gentleman said regarding sprinklers, you talk about affordable housing. If you start doing some of this, you're going to change the building sciences. Because as he said, you can't run lines up in the attic. They have to be insulated. You're also unable to use glycol in the system because the EPA says you can't do that. So if you put a water line up there, you're going to have to insulate that a barrier between the ceiling of the house and the deck line of the attic. So you're going to have to build a truss system to run your lines in there. Again, you're taking affordable housing to a new level. The other thing that is important to note that we would like to know, or let you all know, is the fact that in today's economy, the market is driven by what the consumer wants. Many of our builders offer sprinklers. I offer them in the houses I build. I have yet to have a single person ask to have sprinklers. So it's a market-driven entity, and when this was passed by the state of Tennessee in the annotated change, in I believe it's 68, that the people of the state of Tennessee voted that they did not want sprinklers in their home, which was then passed by the legislative body of both the House and Senate of the Tennessee chambers. So I think a lot of things have already happened that have prevailed that will say that sprinklers are something that the market doesn't want, the homeowner doesn't want. It'll affect affordability of housing, and like I said, the number one thing in life safety is smoke alarms. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we will have Mr. Kevin Atwood. Thank you, David.
Thank you. My name is Kevin Atwood. I reside at 1149 Meadowbridge Lane. I'm here in capacity serving as president of the Home Builders Association of Central Tennessee. And I don't want to restate everything that's already been said, but just to say that as a body, we represent this area of Rutherford County. And on behalf of the membership, we are opposed to the sprinklers based on what you've already heard. There's already a tremendous amount of building codes that are devoted specifically to fire protection, from the materials that are used with flame spread requirements and things like that, to the way the homes are framed now with draft blocking and fire blocking and caulking requirements and attic partitioning and parapet walls. And there's just a tremendous amount that we as builders already do to protect. Really, it's about protecting people and getting them out of the house before the fire consumes them. And that is what the code is designed to do already. So, like I said, I don't want to repeat what other people have already said, but I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you volunteer for that job? Yes, sir. You're doing a great job.
Next, we have Mitchell Bowman. Thank you, David.
Hello, my name is Mitchell Bowman. I reside at 1105 Creek Round Court. Me and my partners own Michael's Homes, and as most of you are aware, we build several homes in Laverne. We have the Ridge and Brookside. But I'm not going to repeat anything the prior three people said, but what I can tell you is we've been sued. We were subjugated, sued from an insurance company. We had to put sprinkler systems in Walden Cove. About 2 years later, after we built the home, we got contacted by the owners, but also we got a lawsuit from the insurance company. People are not aware of anything, any maintenance or anything about a sprinkler system. What happened in this situation, they left and went to Florida for a period of time. They cut their heat down. Naturally, everybody goes up in their attic. They put plywood down. They moved the insulation around. And what happened was while they were out of town, it flooded. They come home and water was running out their front door. So, that's my worry about the sprinkler systems, because people, somebody's going to have to inspect them. Somebody's going to have to make sure that, that they're not moving the pipes around in the attic. So we got sued over that. And the second thing is, I did what I told y'all I would do the last time. We've still been offering sprinkler systems in those subdivisions, and we have not had one taker yet. So thank you today.
Thank you. Moving on to the order of business, the prayer on next Tuesday night will be by Alderman Church, the Pledge of Allegiance by Vice Mayor Brown. Everyone should have received a copy of the minutes, where we'll have departmental reports. First order of old business would be second reading ordinance 2020-03, an ordinance to amend the City of Laverne zoning ordinance by changing the official zoning map for tax map 14 parcels 36, 36.01, 36.02, tax map 14F Group A parcel 1.01 consisting of approximately 9.05 acres located adjacent to 301 Bill Stewart Boulevard from a R1 low-density residential zoning district to a PDR, Planned Density Residential Zoning District, with a R3 high-density residential base zoning district. This received a favorable recommendation from the Planning Commission on January 28th, 2020. Does anyone have any questions about this?
I'd like to speak to the builder or the developer on this, some of the concerns that's been brought up.
Okay, are you motioning to suspend the rules to allow them?
It's a workshop. Do we have to do that?
Yes, sir. We're still under Robert's Rules of Order.
Sure.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I second.
Okay. Gentlemen, Mr. Wamble.
I'm Danny Womble. I'm the engineer that's designed this project and brought it before you. It's 113 units. It's designed for 55-plus senior housing, and I'll be glad to answer any questions, or I can give you a brief summary of the project if you would like, whatever you prefer.
Mr. Womble, if you could go over the brief summary of the project. I've personally been contacted by probably 75 people or better in the area. And I also sit on the Planning Commission. And this project that was presented to us that you spoke of, during the time, it's good for the city, the senior housing. Since then, we seem to have a backlash of misinterpretation on what's being built there. And if you would just please, again, explain exactly what you're going to build so the citizens understand what exactly is going to go on that parcel.
Okay. We had a meeting on September the 4th at the Senior Center and spent a good bit of time, a good bit of detail in presenting the project in detail there, and stayed and answered all the questions that anybody wanted to ask. So there was over 30-something people there. It was overwhelmingly in support of the project. There was nobody at that meeting approached me and said they were against the project or they had any problems with the project. There were a few comments about affordability at that meeting, but at that time, it was completely different from the way that it was presented in the public hearing in front of this body. In the public hearing in front of this body, there were comments about it needed to be structured to where it was a project that people that had limited income could afford to have these units. There were statements that that they didn't think the project was represented properly or was different from what we presented here in this public hearing. I'm here to tell you that's just not true. We presented the exact same information at both meetings, and the discussion at the senior center was more along the lines of, should this project be a project that is presented to the community as a for sale project? And the comments that we were given by everybody that wanted to speak about it, except one person in that meeting, said they couldn't afford to buy it, that they needed the units to be rental units. So the affordability discussion in that meeting at the senior center was about, don't make them for sale, make them for rent. If they're for rent, we can afford to rent them, but we can't afford to buy the units. So that's what we did. We heard what they said. We made that change in the project. So then when we came before this body with a public hearing, then it all of a sudden it was like it needs to be based on the income, and it needs to be assisted, or it needs to be government supported, or it needs to be where the people with the least amount of financial ability in the community can afford to live in the project. This is not assisted living. It's not government housing. It's not rent subsidized. It's market units by a private developer, not by a government entity, and it will be market units. But I explained in that meeting that we designed it to where 40% of the units are going to be smaller units. Units usually rent on some dollar per square foot basis. Smaller units will rent for less than the larger units. So the smaller units are more affordable. So that was our way to approach providing units for people with different incomes. And that's the project. And I would suggest to you that the business end of the deal, or any misunderstandings that people had that attended the meeting, is really not a reason to not vote for this zoning request. If there's technical reasons, engineering reasons, then sure, let's listen to them, let's discuss them, let's talk about them. But I read the comments in the public hearing that's in the minutes. None of those are technical comments that would be justification to not vote and support the rezoning. There's clearly a need in Laverne for senior housing, so I would ask you to support this rezoning request. I would also like to point out to you that I've been doing this for nearly 40 years, and I have not had a rezoning request with public hearings with the community where I've had as much support for this request that I had at the seniors center. And then, for some reason, we here in America, if we aren't against the project, we don't come to the public meetings. So with over 30-something people in attendance there, your minutes reflect, besides the development team, there were only 4 people that came and spoke at the public hearing. And none of those 4 people said they were against the project. They said they misunderstood, or it needs to be something they can afford, or it needs to be something that's income subsidized or something of that nature. So with that said, I would ask you to vote for it when it comes up. That's my summary of where we are now, but I'll be glad to answer questions.
I have just a few questions. The questions that came up also is the density of the area. Can you explain the pros and cons, and maybe have our city engineer support or deny the pros and cons of the location for traffic density?
Well, the density in the area, if I remember, for this project is something in the neighborhood of 11 to 12 units an acre. And we're on a major thoroughfare with Bill Stewart. Your higher density in the city should be on the better transportation routes. So we're on one of the best ones in the city. Also, it's adjacent to the fire station. So if you have emergency needs, they can respond quickly and get to them quickly. We have all of the utilities and the infrastructure in the area to support the project. So from a planning standpoint, engineering standpoint, I believe the density and the location is great and it's good for this use. Also, it's located next to the largest subdivision in town where you're going to have your greatest opportunity of people that would want to move out of their house into a project like this, and they're still close to their neighbors, close to their church, close to everything that they've had that's important to them in their life here in Laverne, and they're close to their friends, and they're close to any family members that live in the subdivision. So I know I designed it, and I know to you, I might appear biased to you, but I've designed hundreds of projects over my 40-year career. This is a good fit density-wise.
And one other question, with Bill Stewart discharging onto Fergus Road, adding that many homes in the area, does that, so in your opinion as an engineer, is that a significant amount of more traffic? Or that's the concern. I mean, that's one of the concerns that I'm personally being hit with and questioned. So when we make this decision at next week's meeting, we want to make sure we cover all the bases. That was, if you'll discuss that a little bit.
Well, that's never been a concern expressed, and I started this process in July of 2019. And this is the first time anybody has proposed to me that there might be a traffic concern at this site. And we've been working on this for nearly a year now. The meeting will come up in June, so that's 1 month short of a year from when we started. But again, it's on one of the major thoroughfares in town. It's the appropriate place to have it. And when Bill Stewart connects to Fergus Road, yes, Fergus Road is a smaller cross-section, but it's not a very long distance to Murfreesboro Road, and it empties directly into Murfreesboro Road. There are numerous opportunities with the interconnected street system. If for some reason there's congestion on Fergus Road, traffic will, if given an opportunity, heal itself if it has other routes to take. So you can take Sand Hill Road and go back down and go out that way. You can go back on Bill Stewart to near Strideman. Near Strideman will take you all the way back out to Murfreesboro Road on the other end of town. You can go out to Stones River Road and go out. You can go to David's Way, and David Way will take you back out. So there's about 4 or 5 really good other options to move this traffic back out to Murfreesboro Road. But 113 units really isn't going to create enough traffic to create a problem in this area, in my opinion.
All right. And one other thing, at the meeting, reflecting on your statements, was there any board members at that meeting at the Senior Citizen Center last year?
The mayor was there, and he was over at the side talking to the director.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Walton,
Thank
for
you.
answering those questions. And Mayor, if I can speak to our city engineer, I have a couple questions for him.
Sure.
I want to speak to this gentleman too.
Oh, yeah.
We can call him back up in just a minute.
Okay.
Mayor, Board.
Good afternoon, Adam. So, as you heard Mr. Womble speak, you're one of the experts that represents the city. He represents the builder. And in your opinion, the traffic density, is that an issue for us when we go back and speak to, the folks in the city?
I wouldn't take any particular exception to the amount of traffic generated from this particular development, just due to the fact that there are multiple cross streets in the area. In addition, most of our roadways aren't anywhere near capacity. Technically, the capacity that you see for a two-lane roadway, and that's standard two-lane section, is almost 15,000 cars a day. For reference, the only two roadways that we have that are anywhere near that are Old Nashville, which is right around 12 to 13,000 currently, which is our busiest collector roadway, and of course Murfreesboro Road and Malden Road. So from a capacity standpoint, not a whole lot of change is going to happen because of 113 units.
And in that area, if he doesn't build this in that area, what is he allowed to build in that area?
I would have to refer to the zoning map. I believe it's R2 zoning.
R1.
It's R1 zoning, so on 9 acres, assuming with the R1 zoning, you could fit about 18 homes, give or take.
So the amount of homes would be reduced,
If it kept the original zone.
but the traffic would probably be even more also, because those homes would have more cars than the average senior.
Proportionally, the way the Institute of Traffic Engineers figures out how many trips are generated from a home is based on a unit number. So any single family residence is treated just the same as a apartment or a condominium, or they're all treated the same, at least in the eyes of ITE. They do give some exceptions. There's factors that you use for like senior living communities, because typically senior living communities, they're not commuting to work in the morning. And that's the only time that, well, traffic engineers care all day, but you really care between about 7:30 a.m. and 9:30 a.m. Then, of course, afternoon peaks between about 3:30 p.m. and 5:30 p.m.
So a little over 100 homes, apartments, or whatever you call them, or 18 homes is the two scenarios that we are dealing with. Thank you for answering those questions.
And Adam, how do you, I live on Fergus Road, how do you come up with the part about, that's not highly traveled as much as some of the other ones, especially with Walmart being right there with 2 entrances and exits?
Everything is relative. So what I, as the city engineer and the civil engineer in general, see as high traffic, most people that have been used to a very rural Laverne or a suburban Laverne would see as very high traffic. What you see on South Walden Road, for example, which has about 5,500 cars per day, is actually a fairly low volume road compared to just pick any road in Nashville, just about. So how much a road can take compared to what we think it can take, or it's a perception thing. So that's just what it is. That's relatively low volume for most roadways, is about 1/3 of its capacity. We've had a level of service A on pretty much every road in Laverne for a long time, just because they've been underutilized compared to how much they could be utilized. So now as we start to urbanize, we build more houses, more businesses, that type of thing, that level of service does go down, but it doesn't degrade to the point that, as an engineer, that I would be concerned.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Anybody else have any other questions for Adam?
Adam, the crash ratio right there at the curve on Fergus Road, I mean, it's pretty high there, right?
According to our master transportation plan, there have been accidents there, but it's not abnormally high by any means. It didn't trigger any automatic justifications for us to start engineering projects to correct geometry, that type of thing. So there are run off the road incidents, which is common for rural sections, and rural sections have ditches. People don't pay attention. They basically fall off the road, and that's kind of what we see most of throughout Laverne and our older parts of town.
It's just if someone just drives off the road there, the road's shut down for an hour, so. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Adam.
Yes, sir.
I think we had some other questions for Mr. Womble.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Womble, when you was up here speaking a while ago, you used terminology or words like not true, justification. 4 people showed up and spoke, misunderstandings, overwhelming. Those were your words. Unless I hear or see something, it's hard for me to justify believing it, because I wasn't at that meeting. I was not allowed to be there. But when 35 people tell me the exact same thing and not miss a beat, I have a little bit of a tendency to think that they're telling me the truth. And then you say that it's simply not true. So we got 35 people telling me, I'm not speaking for the board, me one thing, and then you're saying just the opposite. You know, so I kind of tend to lean the other way. Now, Mayor Cole was there, but Mayor Cole said he did not hear all this. I spoke to all those people, including a board member on my board for the Senior Citizen Center, and an employee. And they all said that you told the seniors that this was going to be an assisted type living thing, low income type thing. Now, I'm just going by what they said. I wasn't there. Make that clear, I was not there. You talked about the traffic. How many units is at Nancy's place?
I don't know exactly how many units are there.
So I took a drive out to Nancy's place. I went at about 9:30 in the morning, and there was not many cars in the parking lot at all. And I came back in the evening, and it was full of cars. So that tells me that the majority of the people that live out there are more than likely working. I don't know. But when this whole thing started, if you remember, you spoke to me first before you spoke to anybody else. You called me. And I was excited about the meeting. I wish I'd have got to go, but I didn't. But I was excited about it. I actually called Tom Broker to find out who you were. And Tom told me. And I said, oh, man, I'm really excited now. When using this and using the word seniors, in my opinion, is a little bit misleading, because at 55 years old, I don't know, a lot of places I guess consider you to be a senior, but I don't think that that is a true statement. As far as you said a while ago that the traffic would heal itself. Well, like I told Engineer Adam, I live on Fergus, and I can assure you, I know what I'm talking about when I say there is no healing traffic on that road. It's not going to happen. I thought that this was going to be something for people who 90% of them wouldn't even drive. And maybe the other 10% or so that did drive, they didn't go anywhere. Maybe their kids came by, or their grandkids or something, and picked them up and things. Do we need something like this? I would have to say, yes, we do, but not in that area. I just want you to know that I think that this was you used the word misunderstanding. I'll use the word misrepresented to those seniors. And I think that out of listening to 35 people, and there's nobody in this boardroom that was there except the mayor, and he didn't hear it. So there's no way to prove it, except by those people. Those are not just people. Those are people that I know personally. I know their families. I know their children. I know their grandchildren. I know where they live at. It's not just hearsay. A lot of those people want to live in Laverne because they were excited about what you said. So you said it's not true, and you said it was a misunderstanding. I think it was. I think what they told me is true, and I think that they were misrepresented. Thank you, sir.
Well, let me respond to some of that. First of all, I didn't misrepresent anything. And I've been consistent in all of my presentations and in the plans that I've submitted and in the questions that I've answered in all these meetings. You said that I called you. I've never called you. We've never talked.
Yes, sir. I was at the
I've
senior
never
center
met
when you
you
called down
before.
there that day. Melissa and Linda was sitting there. I put you on speaker. You called the senior center. It just so happened I answered the phone. I was there.
I did call the senior center, but I have no recollection of talking to you. I didn't call and ask for you. And if I talked to you, you didn't tell me your name, and I didn't know that you were on the board. So I had no knowledge of talking to you, and I had no detailed conversations with anyone about the details of this project except the mayor and everyone that was on the boards that I made presentations to through this process. As far as what was said at the meeting, it's true, you were not at the meeting. I was at the meeting. You're saying that I presented it as an assisted living project. I did not. It's not an assisted living project. It's never been assisted living project. And quite frankly, for the record, I did not make the presentation at the senior center. So everybody that's saying I made a misrepresentation.
They didn't say you said it. They said it was presented to them as that. So I'll take that part back. They did not say you presented. They just said that it was presented to them like that.
Well, you said I said it, and I didn't.
I apologize if I
And
said
I didn't make
that.
the presentation. I was there. I did answer several questions. I did talk to several individuals on a one-on-one basis. Everybody was positive. Everybody was supportive. And you can continue to bombard me with statements like you've just hit me with. What I'm telling you is true. It's still true, whether you believe it or not. And I'm not going to run from that because I don't have anything to be ashamed of, haven't done anything wrong. I've got a good reputation. I've handled hundreds of these projects in a lot of jurisdictions. I have no reason to misrepresent anything. And like I said previously, with over 30-something people that are against a project, they usually show up at the public hearing at City Hall. We only had 4 people that came.
Most of those people down there, we have to get them on buses. They don't drive. They have to have a voice, and that's what we are. We're their voice.
I understand that, but my point is, they found a way to get to the meeting at the center to hear about the project.
We go get them.
Well, the ones I talked to, I had no negative people at that meeting that talked to me. None of the questions were negative.
No, sir, I don't disagree with that at all. Everything I heard was absolutely positive. Everything that I heard was positive about what was said. But then when it came out in a different, an entirely different thing of what they were talking about, that's when things went south. There
Well,
was no negativity at that meeting. Everybody was excited.
And that was my impression too.
Yes.
And
they were.
everybody was for the project.
If I may interrupt, gentlemen, I have heard a lot of personal attacks against the engineer here, but I haven't heard a lot of reasons against the development and that we're here to discuss. So if we could talk about those things. I know traffic was a concern for some people. Our city engineer has already addressed that it is not, our streets are not at capacity. Are there any other questions about the project itself?
I think, in my opinion, Vice Mayor Brown, is when I listen to those things that I hear from all of those people that are totally different from what I'm hearing here, I think in my mind, in my heart, I have to make my vote with credibility.
So a character assassination is how you establish credibility?
Well, I think that if you're gonna put yourself involved with somebody that may or may not be credible, I think that's pretty important. I think credibility goes a long way.
The question of this vote is not about the engineer's credibility, it's about whether or not we proceed with this project.
And that wouldn't be justification for voting something down when it comes to a rezoning. You have to go through as far as specific reasons, but just credibility wouldn't be one they would.
I think
it would
it's
be
one,
overturned
I
in
think
a
it's
court.
one of the things, but, you know, I just wanted you all to know what I heard. I guess what it boils down to is, who do we believe?
Mayor, if I may ask Evan, our legal counsel, Evan, in a situation that you're voting on a rezoning, this is a request, it's something that would be allowed by this body, correct? Or allowed or denied?
I don't understand the question.
What part of the question do you not understand?
It's a rezoning request, so obviously it has to be either admitted or denied.
Okay, the reasoning, if you vote for or deny, would it go traffic density? If our citizens are saying there's a problem on Fergus Road, and our engineer is saying there isn't a problem on Fergus Road, is it okay for us to say, well, you know, we feel the citizens drive the roads, the engineer doesn't even live in this town?
So the standard is whether or not the decision you make is arbitrary and capricious. With respect to zoning issues, especially a rezoning, you have to look at what the proposed rezoning, how it fits in the overall zoning scheme of the municipality. You have to look at the impact on traffic. What you base your decision on is ultimately up to you. But
And what about the opinions of the citizens?
I don't know who the citizens, I don't know who you're talking about.
Well, the citizens,
Who specifically, whose opinion are you relying on?
the 75 people that contacted me, do we allow their feelings and their personal opinions on this? Just like today, we had some of the builders come in. These are guys against the sprinkler systems, which they have a right. We live in a country where they can come in and voice their opinion. Our citizens, the citizens that oppose this project, they're not here. We're here representing the community. And we also have to be fair and represent Mr. Womble and Mr. Schreiman. So Mr. Schreiman is also a resident of Laverne. So I'm asking you, as council, is it okay for us to make a decision on what the citizens are saying? Or do we have to make the decision on what our engineer and the paperwork is saying? I don't know how that's difficult to understand the question.
I think the people voted for you, Matt, not Evan. If you're gonna make the decision, you make it for you.
Mayor, I'm speaking to council, I'm not speaking to Alderman Jones.
I'm speaking for the people, and the people are getting tired. Let's put a face on this. You don't like that man. If it had been any of these other builders, you wouldn't even be up here asking these questions like this. This thing has passed the planning commission, it's passed everything they're supposed to do. They're doing everything by the book. And you're up here asking about some freaking cars? If they could dig a hole and let each one of the residents drive underground or get permission from FAA to let them fly over the street, would it be better then?
Mayor.
This is making absolutely no sense. I object to this line of questioning to everyone in here because
Rule order, Mayor.
you can ask anybody anything.
I think the question that's being asked
Made a point
is,
that I dislike
ju-
this
just-
developer, and this is,
just a moment. I think the question that's being asked is, can you make the decision based on 75 residents or not? Is that, I think that's kind of what you're basing that's the question is, can you base it off of a select group of residents?
So if, for example, if you have public opposition to people who live in the
immediate area,
based on the effect it would have
traffic.
on the property, then that is something that you can consider as one of the factors. There are multiple factors in that. So, but I'm also going to be clear that you have to have a basis. So if you say, like, for example, in the case law that I'm thinking of, which is something I presented at the Planning Commission training a few weeks ago, or months ago, it seems like weeks, but months, is that you have to have things on the record. So what would not be appropriate is to say, I've got 75 people who I cannot identify or won't give their names who don't like this. That's not the sort of record that you can legally base a decision on. You've got to have, I mean, if people have concerns about the impact on the surrounding area, it's appropriate for them to lodge those and to identify who they are, like in public comments time, so that you can hear them and decide whether or not the opposition is grounded in something that relates to what the law requires in this decision you've got to make. But you can't just base it on some number or whatever and say, hey, I think I got 75 calls and people won't like it.
No, I don't, that's not what I said. I said I have 75 people that have personally contacted me and said they oppose this project due to the traffic density and the overcrowdedness of the area with the lack of structure that we have on Fergus Road. Then I asked the engineer and I asked Mr. Womble, both of them with engineering backgrounds. They both feel that the Fergus Road is capable of holding the discharge off of Bill Stewart. So what I'm doing is I get some information from the citizens, I bring it in front of the professionals, I ask these questions. I was rudely attacked by Alderman Jones, made his false statement about Mr. Schreiman. I've known Mr. Schreiman for almost 30 years, and I think we've always.
I've known Satan for 55 and I still don't like him.
You're-
So let me ask, as far as in regards to traffic, because when we met in January with the Planning Commission about this, traffic was brought up by you, Alderman Church. In fact, part of the design with the turn-in lane was put in there specifically to address traffic, but that was the only concern that I can remember being brought up with traffic in regards to that during
Well,
the
the concerns
Planning
are
Commission.
growing. The concerns are growing, Mayor, every day. I mean, every day their concerns are growing with the infrastructure of our city. So because someone didn't make a comment 6 months ago, I think it's fair to say it's our job to exercise 100% of everyone's agreeing or disagreeing. And that's why we have the professionals like Mr. Womble come up here and answer the questions that he's been asked. That's why I asked the engineer. That's why I asked our legal counsel. When I took your class, I was trying to understand that because it is a fine line. You know, there's a lot of things on paper that we have to vote on because the rules allow it. But, you know, if the citizens that live in the area oppose it, I would think, you know, it's, at the end of the day, that would be one of the factors.
It is. It's
And
what
if you
it is.
need 75 names, I'll have that emailed to your
No,
office.
it's not about me. I'm not the arbiter of whether or not the board followed the proper law or not. I'm telling you that if you want to base your decision on something that's grounded on what's in the record, then if you have 75 people that have called you to express concern about traffic, then the best thing you could do on behalf of the city, if you intend to vote against this, is to identify who those people are, put their names and addresses out there, and state on the record who they are, and put it in the record.
Thank you.
Is there any other questions for him? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Moving on to second reading ordinance 2020-04, an ordinance to amend the fiscal year 2019-2020 general fund budget. This has been discussed before. This is second reading. This includes balancing the budget for both the land purchase, the city hall roof, professional services related to the fire department, fleet, and then, of course, the THDA grant. Does anyone have any questions on this?
Is this the actual fiscal year budget that we'll be operating from?
This is our current year budget.
What we're operating, now, not that what we have to approve.
Correct.
And the land purchase is a done deal?
Yes, sir. This board approved as far as the amount and the purchase, so at this point, it's balancing the books from that purchase.
If you could go over one more time, the rate that we paid for the land against the appraisal value?
I don't have in front of me the appraisal value. I know the property was $920,000 from what we have here in the budget amendment.
Bruce, can you get that appraisal value?
I don't have it with me.
It's
at
a
this time.
workshop, I need to see it.
You could ask for it prior to the meeting and have that handy.
We have technology, if you don't mind getting that for me.
Does anybody else have any other questions?
Yeah, I need to see the appraisal value.
Wasn't that provided to you? I know paper copies were provided back in May of last year when we voted on this, and then believe you'd asked for another copy here this year.
So I'm asking for it, are you not gonna
We,
provide it?
I don't have it to provide to you, no, sir. This is something, if you were needing that for this meeting, I would have recommended you ask beforehand, similar as you did to some of your other requests with people here. Any other questions?
You're not gonna get it for me?
We're in the middle of a meeting.
Moving on to first reading ordinance 2020-05, an ordinance to amend Title 7 and Title 12 of the Laverne Municipal Code and adopt the following standard codes: the 2018 International Building Code, 2018 International Residential Code, 2018 International Plumbing Code, 2018 International Mechanical Code, 2018 International Fuel Gas Code, 2018 International Property Maintenance Code, 2018 International Fire Code, 2018 NFPA 101 Life Safety Code, 2018 International Energy Conservation Code, 2018 International Swimming Pool and Spa Code, 2018 International Existing Building Code, 2018 International Private Sewage Disposal Code, 2017 National Electric Code, and ICC A 117.1-2017, accessible and usable buildings and facilities. Does anyone have any questions on this?
Yes, I'd like to call, with the mayor's permission, speak to the fire chief on some questions.
Sure. Do we have either here? Do we have a fire chief or the
Him and Curtis are here somewhere.
fire marshal here? Officer, could you see if they are right outside that door, please? While we're waiting on them, I know one thing I want to add is, I know there was some discussion at the last meeting about sprinklers, and we actually, I discovered through some research and conversation, we actually could not add them in with this meeting because per state code, there would have to be a special meeting that it's TCA 68-120-101. It's A, 8, B, and I. Basically, it states you have to have a special meeting, 2 of them in fact, where only the sprinklers are on the agenda. Nothing else is on there to vote that in, and it has to be voted in by 2/3 majority vote. Not just your standard majority, but 2/3 of a majority. And that's state statute. That was done several years ago whenever that was, sprinklers were removed from being part of that.
I remembered something about that. Was it Representative Sparks did that or something, didn't he?
I'm not sure which representative carried that, but
he did.
since it's state statute, that's not something that we can just add into this since.
We're not adding any.
Yes, sir. In the way this is submitted, it would be adding it in.
No, it's not, Mayor. You're wrong with that.
The
because-
way this is submitted, yes,
because
sir.
I also looked at that statute, and again, we'll go to Evan. Even the International Building Code already has it in there, so we're not adding anything. And the interpretation, we're adopting a code with an existing rule. We've removed the rule, and now the way you guys have changed the verbiage on here, you're wanting to continue the trend of after it was removed. And if what the mayor is saying is true, when the city implemented this rule 2 administrations ago, you were legal counsel at the time. Did we break the law then? So why are we breaking the law now?
What is your question?
My question is, how are we're not adding something. We're adopting a code that it's
State
already
law
in.
does not allow municipalities to adopt in wholesale codes when it comes to sprinklers. They did a carve out, which is part of the statute.
But this code is already in the International Building Code. We're not adopting sprinklers. We're just accepting the code as written.
I'm not debating it. I'm just telling you what the law says is that the municipalities can adopt mandatory sprinkler provisions as part of a wholesale adoption of a code. That's what the law says. I didn't write it.
If you adopt it, I understand what you're saying, but that's not what's happening here. What's happening here, we are adopting an existing written code.
But we're not adopting something that we have already in the city. The city is adopting would be adopting a mandatory sprinkler ordinance. So to do so by state law, we would have to have a special meeting per state law that only addresses that and has 2/3 of the vote in both meetings to add that, to make that a mandatory. That's just state law.
So would it be ignorant of us to say we need to advertise the meeting and go that route?
Advertise what meeting?
The meeting to put that on the agenda?
This would be, currently there isn't a meeting for that. This meeting, that, as far as, in regards specifically to this ordinance, it would not include the sprinkler. You could not add that in with this because, number one, it's not just a one-item agenda, and it has to be a special meeting. It's not a regular meeting.
And when was that law?
Randolph's got something he wants to say about it.
Randolph, come on up.
Didn't mean to interrupt you. He's back there, looked like, what's his name on?
I'll just throw this out. And I do recollect the last time that this was brought up was in the spring of 2014. And the Tennessee Code annotated does require that separate meeting be held so that I don't bring to you the residential code and put this in blind under y'all's eyes. I mean, obviously you know about it, but when this was brought up, I do recollect that there was because it was adopted, the ordinance was adopted that we mandate residential fire sprinkler initially in spring of 2014. And there was a special held meeting when that was the only, I mean, it was all of 10 minutes, 2 minutes, maybe 3, that makes the community aware, makes y'all aware as leaders of the community, that now residential fire sprinklers are required by code because it's in the code. That TCA prohibits me from being able to just slide it in and no one know about it. And then all of a sudden we got homes that are being built per code with the fire sprinkler. And I had forgotten, but you're right. It was a special call meeting.
So you're telling me I've been trying to get this on the agenda. I spoke to legal counsel, the city administrator, you and the mayor, fire chiefs, assistant fire chiefs, or I'm sorry, fire marshals. And none of you guys could think of we have to have a special meeting?
That's the way it was done 6 years ago. Exactly the way you're describing. That's the way it was done 6 years ago, and it has to be done again this year.
So why wasn't it done like that this time?
It is, well.
That's something completely separate from adopting, that would be adopting residential sprinklers. That's different from adopting your building codes. That's two separate
It's
things.
not separate. When we adopt the International Building Code, it's written in there as the code.
But by state law, it is
It's
different.
written in there as the code,
It
correct?
currently is presented that it's opt-out, but it's opted out.
Because we took it out.
Correct, as a local
And the
modification.
reason why we took it out is what?
That's, seems to be the standard across the country.
No, you said the standard in the county.
Well, okay. let's
And
narrow it
I've
down
done
to
some
the county.
research on that, Randolph. The standard in the county, which is a good answer, because if the county, I use that a lot, if the county's doing it or sister city's doing it, just like the builder said, you know, we go back, we have to find the pros and cons. The pros and cons of comparing us to Smyrna is we have half the fire apparatus and half the firefighters. That's why they don't have sprinklers, because they have adequate fire service. City of Murfreesboro, they almost have 3 times the amount of fire apparatus and 3 times the firefighting capabilities.
Mayor,
Well,
point of order, we're not here to debate the TCA code.
I'm-
That's a
I'm
Tennessee
discussing-
state law, not.
I'm gonna finish my
So-
statement.
but at this point, though, the sprinklers wouldn't be part of this at all. That would have to be a completely separate meeting per TCA code. This conversation needs to be focused on these as far as the codes, because the residential sprinklers would have to be a separate meeting. It would have to be a special called meeting, 2 of them. Again, that 2/3 of this board would have to vote in favor of.
So it would be on an ordinance by itself.
It would be by itself, and it would be, not just an ordinance by itself, an agenda by itself. Nothing else would be part of the actual agenda. It's
So
just those
not-
items.
It's not in this ordinance tonight or
No.
Tuesday, it's nothing to do with it.
Correct. By state law, that is a completely separate issue.
Okay.
This is just the different codes that were mentioned here.
So why won't the mayor allow us to promote that meeting and get it on as an
We,
agenda?
we don't have a meeting. You're saying promote that meeting. What meeting? There's not a special meeting
Why can't
called.
we have that meeting, Mayor?
Why can't we? I haven't called one yet. We've just now started a discussion on it at this point.
Well, no,
So-
we've been discussing this for a year. I had a conversation with our interim fire chief and our fire marshal today. And let this go on the record so everyone understands. We do not have adequate fire service to protect the citizens of Laverne. Okay? We do not have it. It's all smoke and mirrors. These guys are out there doing the best they can with limited equipment and supplies and personnel.
I understand that's how you feel.
I'm trying to save lives.
but the
You're trying to
sprinklers-
create smoke and mirrors.
No, sir. I'm stating, I'm sorry that you disagree with Tennessee state law. But again, we have to follow the rule of law here. We can't just do what we want. So going back, does anyone have any questions in regards to the actual codes that I listed off here?
So just and I'm just asking a question, being we got builders here, and we got fire chief interim and fire marshal, do we just need to wait and let them come back whenever that meeting develops, or can we ask the fire marshal and his?
Well, anything that involves sprinklers would not be on topic for this.
Wait.
So, because that would have to be a completely separate meeting. That would not be part of any of these codes that we would be adopting.
All right, I have a question about the current codes that's on here for the fire marshal Brinkley.
Wait a minute.
David's all over it.
That's cool how Randolph just took over, didn't it?
Yes, sir.
Fire Marshal Brinkley, with these codes that are presented in front of us for next week's meeting, if we adopt this, does this give us adequate fire service to protect the citizens of Laverne with the capacity and residents that we have, with the equipment and manpower that we currently have in our city?
Okay. So I'll speak specifically on NFPA standards. I don't want to misquote it. I believe it's NFPA, help me out, Chief. 720 is a standard for fire department personnel and so forth. NFPA 720 speaks, and it bases it on a population per square miles and so forth. We would be around the 1,400 mark. So technically, NFPA would recommend that we have 15 suppression personnel per residential fire. And that would be for your ordinary, normal hazard residential structure fire. At minimum staff, we run 13, correct? Yeah, 13, including the battalion chief. The battalion chiefs technically would be considered a suppression personnel, but we all know that that's going to be your command staff, and the likelihood of them actually going in and fighting fire would be very slim.
So if you go based solely off of the standards for one structure fire, if we were at full capacity with 16 personnel on shift, then yes, we could provide adequate protection to one residential structure fire. As you all know, with that staffing, providing that one service to that one particular call, that would be all that we could provide adequately. That would completely deplenish what we have to respond. Now, that's for just a residential fire.
And a commercial fire.
No, sir. So a commercial fire, and I don't have the stats for that, forgive me, I can easily get it for you. As the buildings increase, structures increases and so forth, if it's a commercial fire, then obviously the count for fire suppression personnel is going to increase. And the way they base this is off of different type of jobs that would typically be required inside of fighting a structural fire, whether it be a residential or commercial. They look at it based off of ventilation type things, search and rescue techniques that may be required during these tactics, water supply. So there's several things that I'm sure NFPA comes to terms with on providing these statistical numbers. How they come up with that, I don't know, but I can tell you that is a standard through NFPA. So to answer your question, if we base it off of the NFPA standard, we can provide adequate service to one residential structure fire. If you go above that, then technically, no, we would not be providing the adequate service that is recommended by NFPA. Now, will our personnel do what needs to be done? Absolutely. That's why we hire them. That's what they're trained to do. And I have no doubt in my mind that our fire department will provide the best services possible, and go toe-to-toe with anyone in this area. So I don't say that leaving the board or anyone in the city feel that we're not going to do what needs to be done or can be, solely basing it off of standards that have been applied nationally, no.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong here, though, but as far as our fire department staffing, that's different from actual adoption of our building codes. That is something completely different. This would be the codes that we're using to build with. When you're talking about staffing for the individual fire department, which I believe we've been as far as below NFPA standards since the fire department was purchased, made part of the city.
Since the fire department was in existence
Yes.
from day one.
Since day one. So as far as staffing is something that we handle through the regular budget process. This is as far as your individual codes for building, for electrical, for energy conservation. It's all of that. Adopting this isn't about the individual staffing levels of the fire department.
No, but it's about the code of building a structure, your fire code and your firewalls and everything else. I mean, so it goes hand in hand with our capacity of how many firefighters do we have today that can put out the structure fire? Laverne's homes went from 12 to 1,500 square feet to 3,600 square feet.
It doesn't go hand in hand, though.
It does go hand in hand.
This is the standards used for building. This isn't
It goes
as far
hand
as
in
the
hand.
firefighting. Now, Fire Marshal, whenever you've had a chance to review these, do these standards, do they make buildings, newer buildings, do they make them as far as safer for individuals?
Explain, what standards are you speaking of?
Any of as far as the fire standards that you've been reviewing here for building, do they update with these regulations anything to make these buildings safer from where we currently are with our building codes?
There are amendments that have been made from the 2012 International Fire Code to the 2018 International Fire Code. I don't want anyone on the board to get confused. And this isn't a pass-off by any means. Obviously, we are 100% in supportive of things that we're not going to discuss. But the fire code deals with commercial properties, not residential properties. So when we dive into the International Fire Code, we are looking at commercial properties and the safety of the people that are going to be occupying those and therefore traveling in and so forth. Your International Residential Code is going to cover, your residents that are being built within itself. So I don't want those two to get confused. And the reason I speak on that is I have not examined the International Residential Code. That's not what I look at. I can tell you that there was a different code series from 2012 to 2015 International Fire Code, and there had been amendments made with that. I have reviewed the significant changes from 2015 to the 2018, and there are some changes that have been made between our current code and the code that we're proposing to adopt into the 2018. And just like any code, the codes are established to obviously make, buildings safer. So the answer to your question, yes, I mean, the changes that are made are obviously made for the better, through professional studies and so forth in implementing safer buildings. Did that answer your question, sir?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any other questions?
A couple of questions. Do we still have a partnership with Smyrna and Metro?
Yes, sir. We do
Based
have, MOUs and mutual aid agreements,
Okay.
with the
And-
understanding.
Okay, well, the second question is, how has the Laverne Fire Department been doing so far?
I apologize.
How has the Laverne Fire Department been doing so far,
As far as
their job?
our firefighters do an excellent job.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I have a question. So the 10,000 square foot house on Stones River Road that's being built right now,
Yes, sir.
how would you respond to that? Do we have the capabilities?
And I don't want to give a vague answer, but that's really going to be dependent upon the type of response that's required. If you're looking at a fully involved structure that is 10,000 square feet, I would say we would probably need to call an additional, mutual aid for that. If you're looking at a one room and contents and the first arriving crews can determine that, it is contained to one room, they may be able to make an interior, attack or advance on that fire and contain it without us having to call. So again, I don't want to act like I'm dodging the question. That's not my intent, but it can go from one extreme to the other. And Chief Matthews can weigh in if he'd like, but that would be my opinion. I think it would be based upon what we're responding to. Just because it's a 10,000 square foot structure doesn't mean that 10,000 square foot's on fire. It could easily be a small fire that's containable, with a small interior attack, or it could be the opposite extreme and it being something that we'd have to contact mutual aid to bring in additional supplies, water, manpower, and so forth.
We explained to the board the risk of Lake Road, 3,000 square foot plus homes. The response time is great, just like the builder said, 2.5 minutes, we have boots on the ground. How long does it take to get Station 1 and Station 3 out there and before we're in there saving lives? Are we where we need to be right there today as we continue to build? Or are we putting our firemen at risk and the lives of people that are buying those homes?
Anytime that you increase your population, it's just like anything else with law enforcement, fire, medical. You have to increase the demand. The demand goes up. When you increase population, then you're going to increase call volumes and so forth. With the topography of that, yes, it does slow down a response, slightly from Station 2 on Waldron Road or 42 to that area. Again, depending upon traffic, time of day is going to depend on the backup response time from Station 41 and so forth to Station 43. So I don't want to act like I'm dodging the question. I mean, could it be time consuming? Absolutely, it could. If it's 5 o'clock on a Friday afternoon and traffic's heavy on Waldron Road, obviously the response time from Station 41 is going to be substantially slower versus if it's, early Sunday morning at 1 o'clock a.m., less traffic. Population-wise, forgive me, I'm not familiar with what, ISO would typically require, a fire station per populated area. As the growth continues out there, then obviously, the fire service would need to increase its services and the resources in that area.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I do have a question in general. This is 2018 code, we're in 2020 now. What is the code that we're currently operating under, what standard year?
We're down to 2012.
We're in 2012, so we're currently under 8-year-old code, and we're asking to update that to 2-year-old code, which is an improvement, certainly. So I think that it's important to realize that in those 6 years between the 2012 code and the 2018 code, Certainly improvements have been made in safety, not just related to fire, but also electrical, pools. There's all kinds of different codes that we're adopting here, sewage.
I agree 100%, Vice Mayor Brown, and that's why I'm concerned with everything that's been removed from the code, not just sprinklers.
Any other questions? Thank you, Fire Marshal.
Yes, sir.
Moving on to number 6, second reading ordinance 2020-06, an ordinance to amend Title 8, Chapter 3 of the Laverne Municipal Code regarding special event beer permits, and to amend Title 20, Chapter 2, Section 20-203 of the Laverne Municipal Code regarding Parks and Recreation prohibited acts. This received a favorable recommendation from the Beer Board on April 28, 2020. Any questions? Okay. Moving on to number 7, first reading ordinance 2020-07, an ordinance of the City of Laverne, Tennessee, adopting the annual budget and tax rate for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2021. I believe everyone was sent the budget about a week and a half ago. Is that correct, Bruce? Any questions on that?
Yes, I have a question. I asked for Tom Broker to be here tonight. Is he not available?
Former Alderman Broker is here, yes.
I seen him out here.
Officer, would you step outside and see if Tom Broker is here? Here he is.
David, done wipe it down for him?
Yes, sir, you're good.
How are you, Tom?
Good, sir, how are you?
So, going over the budget, I had a couple questions that I asked Phyllis and Bruce when we had our meeting last week. On your budget it's a modest budget. So, my concern is with the hourly employee. Your overtime, there's some concern with how are we taking care of the employee? Are we doing it properly within the guidelines of the law on her hourly rate? Because what I'm being told is we're actually using the flex time policy with her. And I think we need to correct that in this budget because everyone's saying we don't have flex time. And if you need more money to cover her overtime, I think it's something that needs to be known because I feel, Evan, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, if we have an hourly employee and she works over 40 hours, she should get time and a half. So, is that a yes?
Yeah.
So my concern is when you guys go on your trips to solicit, and that's your job, I'm not using that in any other way, you utilize her as a member of the team. So she's working out there and she comes back to home. If she takes a day off or whatever, or we're promoting her to take a day off to reduce her overtime and we're flexing it out, it's simply wrong. And now's the time we need to correct this. If we need to correct it, we need to allocate the funds and we need to stop breaking the law.
What law are you citing that you allege the city is breaking?
I'm saying that we have an hourly employee that we discussed a year ago. The same thing's happening. When she goes out of town on these projects with Tom and the economic team, when she comes back to the city, she's in overtime, but and it's not showing up. I mean, the budget, the financing, she's not getting paid for this time. And if she's working the hours, I mean, she's way over 40 hours. We're not keeping her in 40 hours. How are we not, in his own numbers and finances numbers, it's a proven fact. So I think this board's owed an explanation on why we continue to do that.
Well, my question was, you said that we're breaking the law. I'm trying to find out specifically what law you're stating.
I feel if we're having her take a day off, that's flexing her time. And are we allowed to do that?
May I ask a question? Because this came up, I want to say, and I think you and I originally addressed this a year and a half ago. And then I think it was last budget retreat, we talked about the same thing. First of all, I hope we're not breaking any laws. We're certainly following any policy, and I've asked for guidance from everything from the auditors to the city administrators to the mayor and so on.
I don't think my department is any different than, let's say, water sewer. If there's a water main break and overnight they have to work versus they normally come in from 6 to whatever time. Everything is typically done within that pay period. So with the exception of recon, we're probably gone 2 days, maybe 3. So if she does go over, and then she does not work that, say, that following Friday when she gets back, she hasn't gone past the 40 hours. So in David's case, David may have a situation where Old Timers Day is coming up, so moves his workers to set up on Saturday, Sunday. I don't want to use the word flex because that's got a negative connotation right now.
Well,
But he
use
has
what word are we using, Tom?
well, he has, the word I would use is to schedule. As a director, he has the ability to schedule his employees to fit the needs of his department, to fit the needs of
So
the
you're
city.
telling me, with your assistant, she's not getting over 40 hours a week?
No, sir, not in any time since then, especially because it was called into question. And one thing that I did not want to do was, I didn't know where it was going to land. I know you all sent it off to employment law somewhere.
Yeah, we got anything back on any of that?
I have not. I don't know if you all have.
I mean, it's been a year and a half. We got that back, Phyllis?
What's that?
The flex time investigation or whatever it was?
There's not a flex time investigation I'm aware of. There's a policy book,
Is that back yet?
but we don't have a final version for the board yet, no.
And in our personnel policy book, it does give the city administrator the authority to modify schedules
We're
as
not
needed.
modifying schedules. We're working people more than 40 hours and we're not paying them.
Well,
She
that's,
wasn't physically working according to Tom.
Yeah, let me let me
I'd
clarify.
like to s-
No,
yeah,
let me
explain
clarify.
that.
No,
Thank you,
really,
Phyllis.
because this is what a question was asked, and I think, Phyllis, you remember when I spoke to the auditor about this. So when we fly out there, that's on city time. She's out there, she's flying to her job, so on. Or let's say flies to Charlotte or Orlando or so on, just as I or the mayor or any of the city administrators, Ann has gone with us to recon. But once she gets out there and she's not at the convention and she's in her own hotel room, I mean, she's not working. If we're gone 78 hours, she's not working. She's,
understand that.
So I guess we have to clarify that first. What are her actual hours when she's at a meeting? And the way I've been looking at it is, amount of times that she's there at the convention, her travel time, I think it would need to be considered. But when she's back in her hotel room or having dinner, that would be the same thing. No, I do, if there is a way, look, I think, before I came here to work for the post office, I was with the union. I certainly did everything I could to get the employees paid their optimum amount. So if she's deserving more, absolutely, let's give her more. But my point is, I don't think we've gone beyond. There's times where we've been away for a period of time, and yes, I've given a Friday off or a Monday off or something, or maybe a morning on a Monday and an afternoon on a Thursday or something along those lines. But I've tried to keep it within that 40-hour, because I don't have any. If you all want to give me money in the budget for overtime,
It's not an open check, but I'm saying I just don't want to make sure, I want to make sure that we don't get into a situation to where if we have a young lady out there working side by side with you 10, 12 hours a day on a Saturday, these are your words, 10 or 12 hours a day at a show, you get back to the hotel, you change your clothes, you go out to eat. Sometimes the people you meet at the show, it's business. And you solicit, you go to dinner, that's why you have that budget, that's why you have that. To me, that's still working.
Sure, sure.
Maybe not the time she's getting cleaned up, at her hotel room, swapping from business to something a little more comfortable for the evening attire, but it's still working.
Sure.
And
So Matt, can I give an example? Like New York would be an example, probably the one I can think of other than recon. We're there 3 days. We went to a broker, took us out to dinner, talking business. Now that would to me would be considered work.
I agree.
And work hours. Now, the next night, she decides to go to a Mexican restaurant, an Italian restaurant there on her own. That's not work hours.
I agree.
So we try to work within that the best that we can. Even there's other things, heading into meetings. There's times we have to get flash drives ready. We have to get everything ready for where we work over the weekend. And then again, maybe Thursday, Friday when we get back, I cut her loose. Because again, I just don't have it in my budget. Now, I did in the beginning, when we brought the assistant on, I had asked if we could make this job salary, and I was given, under regulations, you can't, because there were certain criteria she didn't fit, so we didn't run into the situation where she was maybe going over as far as hours go. Look, here's what I'm saying as far as my department goes, and I'm sure there's others in the city. You all put a policy together, we'll follow it. So again, if we're doing something that, use your words, illegal, we don't want to do that. But we have asked, and we have followed the direction of the auditors, our city administrators, and certainly the mayor has been with me in probably 60 or 70% of my trips, so he knows what's going on.
And that's my confusion, if we are dealing with this a year and a half later. Bruce, is there something wrong with the company providing this?
We have been working on a draft version for some time. Of course, the whole COVID situation has backed that up considerably. But we were actively working on that before COVID hit. And, you know, it's been on a break for a long while.
So let's take
obviously,
COVID out of it. It's still a year.
Right. Well, we're working on it. I mean, there's a time issue involved. You know, we have a lot going on. It's not, we can't dedicate full time just to that project.
And we're not working on just one policy. This is the entire policy book for the entire city. So this is something to make sure not just updated for our needs, but also updated with state law. So it's not just one little thing. So it goes off to an attorney who basically has to go through, review the whole thing, compare, contrast, and then start making changes, put that together, send a draft version, and then go from there with what changes
Have they
don't
sent a
make
draft
sense.
version yet?
I believe that's what Mr. Richardson just said.
They do have a draft?
Yes, sir, and I told you that last week in our meeting. Yes.
Yeah. I think you were getting that for me, right?
You haven't asked for it yet.
Well,
I
thought
think I
that
did
was a
ask for
dead issue.
But at this point, let's circle back to the budget, because that's what this is about. So any other questions about?
You have enough money in your budget to make sure she's properly paid?
I believe
You
so.
don't have to do the smoke and mirror thing. I mean, if
I believe so right now. Again, if it comes up that it needs to be, and you would add some overtime, I'm pretty certain she won't be opposed to that. But at any rate, yes, sir, I think we do.
I mean, we just don't want her working if she's not getting paid for her time.
Agreed.
I mean, that's all I'm trying to do here.
Yeah, no, we don't want her, if you're adjusting it and modifying her schedule and she's getting in her 40 hours or 80 at 2, we don't want her getting paid for something she didn't do. That's embezzling. That's illegal. We don't want that.
Any other questions?
No question, just a statement. Glad to see you got a haircut.
I kind of knew that was coming. It felt good. So.
Any other questions for Tom?
Thank you for coming in, Tom.
Thank you, Tom. Any other questions on the budget as a whole?
Yes, can we talk about all the positions that you added from the last meeting?
Okay, the only position I added from the last meeting was the assistant fire chief position. Speaking with multiple candidates for fire chief, that was one thing that every one of them stressed, which I agree would have been a great help with former Chief Clark leaving as well. So that's the position that was added, is the assistant fire chief.
So with that said, they stood in front of us last year and asked to remove the assistant fire chief position and add 4 battalion chief positions. Do you remember that conversation, Mayor?
3, not 4.
Okay, the 3 positions. So we don't have 4 battalion chiefs?
No, sir.
Okay. So, I mean, but you do remember the
I
conversation?
remember that's how Chief Clark wanted it structured, yes.
And I believe that's how you wanted to structure it, because you were,
No, sir, that's.
you lobbied that pretty good, Mayor.
That was a request from former Chief Clark.
And the supervisor positions in Parks and Rec. David, can we talk about that for a second? I think we added that also, right, Mayor?
No, that was actually submitted with last month's budget that was deferred. So that was there, and that's the exact same positions we've been talking about for a year to structure the Parks and Recreation and Maintenance, similar to how the Michael Dietz's department is.
So I know that's how we discussed it last year when you restructured, because it was saving us a lot of money combining the two. And I agree with maintenance and everything following under David was a great decision. But now the department, we're wanting to add a couple supervisors on top of it. So the department's going to be it's gonna be bigger than it was having them separate.
Well, actually, our department actually needs to be bigger because we never slow down. So
I mean, I'm not saying
it
you
comes
should.
in every day and it depends, it's not what we're gonna do today, what gets neglected today. So
Yeah.
we could always use the help. And it's tough, and I'm trying to be not selfish. It's tough for me to keep track of both sides because it's still, even though they're under the same umbrella, it's still two departments. So it would be it'd be easier to manage if those guys were in their place and they could take the lead on those jobs.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
And also, after speaking to Bruce and Phyllis at our meeting the other day, I questioned, we're at that $23 million mark. And with the new fire hall, would that be a budget amendment that
Well-
we would have to add to this budget?
If it was done during this budget year, but at this point, we're not even close to that. I mean, we're still in discussions with Grace Church about some additional land back there. So we're not even to that point.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'd like the question to be answered because we are in discussion with Grace Church, and we went over that a little bit too, about maybe moving some sewer lines. They came back with a big number than what we are anticipating on paying. So I think that's got to be in this budget talk because that work and everything else is going to come in front of this board because it's not budgeted money. So that would have to be a budget amendment also. So,
If it was done this year, yes, sir, it would have to be a budget amendment once we've determined how we're going to pay it, yes.
and just in the sewer lines and the engineering, if that's even allowed, and I asked Bruce about, would that be something that has to go back because the plot changes? That may be an Adam question. And it's goes in hand with this budget. Would that have to go back in front of Planning Commission?
Yes, we've not had a fire station go before Planning Commission
No,
yet.
I'm talking of you have the board's approval to negotiate on that property, and that's where we're at, and we're negotiating. They've came back, with a number that they feel their property's worth. Of course, the city, hopefully the city doesn't feel, obligated to spend that much money on it. So they came back with another plan on maybe, moving some sewer lines for them, and some redesign, some backfill. There's a lot of work there at taxpayers' expense. And I'm almost certain it has to come back through Adam and the Planning Commission before we can even discuss it in front of this board, right?
What are you saying has to come back before Planning Commission?
If we make a deal with with the property owners on rerouting their sewer lines and everything else and changing the plots over there, would that be something that has to go back?
As far as changing plots, I would think if you're gonna merge two different plots into one, yes, we've seen that with other items where that's come before, I believe in January or December, we had that. So that would. As far as sewer lines, I don't know that one off the top of my head. Adam, do you know that one, as far as if there's any redesign to any sewers, which, mind you, at this point, we're not even at?
Well, it's being discussed.
Yeah, it's just a discussion item at
That's
this
pretty
point.
serious. That's a lot of money.
Mayor Board, so the process that they would go through if you were to make an agreement wherein the city agreed to bear the burden of the cost of improvements, if that was what is agreed to during that conversation, I would suppose that our attorney in doing his job would have some contingencies put in there in case the costs exceed itself. But on down the road, what would happen would be a consolidation plat where we essentially move the lines that define the parcels. During that consolidation plat, we would add an easement showing where we're going to put the new lines. After the platting process, we'd basically let the project or our sewer department would handle the actual construction in-house, I would suppose, if it's a minor one. But basically, a plat would kind of clear up everything. So that any plat would have to go before Planning Commission.
So a consolidation plat.
Yes, sir.
So on a dollar amount, would that be something that we want to put in the budget? Because this is happening. I mean, I don't want everyone to sit here and pretend like this isn't currently happening. You know, we're negotiating with these folks, so,
But we don't have a dollar amount.
well, you have a dollar amount what they want for the property.
Well, that's, as far as, that was already rejected. I mean, what they asked for the property, that was already, so this is being
What was
discussed.
it? Is that-
It was essentially what they were looking for. They didn't give an actual dollar value, but they said that they were looking for the amount to pay off their mortgage, which is a significant amount from what they said.
The dollar amount I
Which
got
is
from
higher
the
than-
administrator was around $300,000
So.
on a property that appraised for $30,000.
So that was rejected, and then at that point, there's been some discussion about, as far as donating the land and some sewer movement. And then as far as if there's anyone who contacts the city to find out where to dump fill, they would be told, well, you can dump fill over at this group's property.
So it went from 300,000 to a donation? That's pretty good.
Well, we would incur some costs with the sewer line, which, moving, which we don't know what that dollar value is yet. So that's what we're working on. So to put it into the budget, we don't know the dollar value. There's not a way to put a dollar with it if we don't know.
Jason, the whole
It'd be
budget is done like that. We don't know dollar amounts.
Well, you budget a specific amount. How much are you wanting to budget
I
for
don't know.
that
That's
sewer?
why you're the mayor.
So you don't have any input?
I'm trying to get input right now. I need to know what direction are you going with this? I mean,
Well,
can we do that legally,
at-
Evan? Can we negotiate with a private property owner that says, hey, if you give us this property, we'll move your sewer line and grow your plot? Is that legal?
I mean, I have to look at specific terms.
Yeah. So have you seen the terms on this?
No terms have been agreed upon.
Have you been involved with this?
I mean, I'm sure I have. I don't know.
I mean, you know if you have or you haven't.
I don't recall every specific conversation I've had with people about the project. I don't understand why you're being so accusatory.
No, I'm asking you a
Well,
question.
No, you're not
at-
being accusatory.
No, I'm
You're
asking
being
questions.
accusatory.
At this point,
You're being accusatory.
No,
we-
I'm asking questions.
Alderman Church, at this point, we don't have terms.
Okay.
So for Evan to sit there and review terms that don't exist, that's not possible. For us to just randomly guess at a dollar figure when we don't even know if this is going to take place this budget year or next budget year, we don't know that. You're asking us to budget in something that at this point isn't a done deal and it is basically waiting
No, I'm
for
not
this
asking you-
portion.
I'm not asking you to budget it in. What I'm asking you is why are we doing we're in the early stages of preparing a budget amendment is what we're doing. So you're attempting to pass a $23 million budget. Right behind that, there's gonna be at least another $1 million, just, $700,000 or $800,000 with this property changing everything out.
What are you basing that dollar figure on?
Fire hall.
What are you basing that dollar figure on for your sewer lines that you just mentioned?
These are numbers that I've sat and discussed with our city administrator and our finance director.
You've discussed those specific
If you were
numbers.
at the meeting, you would know it. That's my question.
Mr. Richardson, did y'all discuss that dollar value during the meeting?
Not for the church property, no, not that
We
much.
didn't
Ms.
discuss-
Rogers?
We didn't discuss the church property, Bruce?
We didn't talk about $700,000,
We didn't talk about 300, how did I know it was $300,000, Bruce?
because I told you
Because
what
you-
part of the
because we
negotiations
discussed
were,
it.
but it wasn't no $700,000.
Because we discussed it.
You've inflated it greatly.
At this point, you're sitting there saying that there's a budget amendment coming. We don't know that this is going to happen in this budget year. You're wanting us to budget for something we don't know is going to happen. If it is, this board's going to have plenty of conversation throughout because it's all got, the church, as far as the deal with the church, that's got to come back before this board to be approved. There's not just, hey, in 2 months there's a budget amendment. It's not like that.
I understand how that works. I'm just concerned when we have a $35,000 appraisal. They want a sum of $300,000, and you're negotiating moving sewer lines and stuff for them to make it happen,
But as far as,
to get your property. And I feel as taxpayers, that's an expense. That it may not be $300,000 on paper.
well, that comes before this board to approve. Again, so this isn't something where I just say, okay, you guys go. I negotiate with them, that comes back before this board determines to either accept it or deny it. And then, and you talked about the fire department. I mean, we have a brand-new fire chief who's coming in, so we're gonna stop and we're gonna have some conversations with him about Fire Station 41 and say, hey, this is what we've been working on through 2 prior chiefs. What are your thoughts on each piece of this? And we're gonna incorporate him into those discussions too.
Good.
So this isn't all something that's going to just snap its finger and start happening. The board is involved the whole time.
Okay, time will tell. Thank you.
Any other questions on the budget?
Yes, let's talk about this budget. Phyllis, I just want to kind of just say this and get you to confirm or deny this. This does include a cost of living increase for our employees as it has for the last several years, correct?
That's correct. It does include a step up, which is part of our rate structure.
Okay, and that is consistent with what we've done in previous years. I just wanted to make sure that was a part of this. Also, one thing is that we have in this, crosswalks has been put in as a line item in this, pending if it gets funded from a grant that has been applied for. Is that correct?
I'm not sure, has it been applied for? Adam?
It was added to the capital plan.
Yep.
Applied for it last year. They somewhere between a year and 18 months to get around to it.
Thank you.
And both of those were added in from your comments from last month.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to let everyone know.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, moving on to the consent agenda. A, approve city bids and purchases. Number 1 is bid for resurfacing of the tennis courts. This is something that we've discussed. It was going to be requested as a capital item, but with David's budget, they were able to find some money for that. So that is in your packet. Any questions on that? Number 2, state contract purchase, 2 mowers for the Parks and Recreation Department. This is replacing 2 mowers that are, David, are they 8 years old? 8 years old, yes, sir. I thought I remembered that. Thank you. It is replacing those. Again, this is coming out of this year's budget. Moving on to number 3, state contract purchase, Toro vehicle for the Parks and Recreation Department. Any questions? Number 3, state contract purchase, skid steer for Parks and Recreation Department. Any questions? Number 5, purchase boat, motor, and trailer using the Firehouse Subs Grant Fund. And this is the same grant that we talked about last month, and I believe we all had pictures in our packet of these items. Number 6, purchase field camera system for Channel 3. This is a field camera that Jerry can basically take on the go and be able to film and different events. And Jerry, if I'm not mistaken, this is one that will basically send it back to your system automatically. Is that correct? Correct. Thank you. He did say that's correct. Any questions? Moving on to B, approved lease agreement with Mark Pirtle for the property adjacent and behind Stormwater Building located at 5175 Murfreesboro Road. This is a 3-year contract at $500 a month. And yes, that amount is correct, $500 a month. That is, that is a very good rate.
With this lease, does it have any exceptions of the purchase of the property or anything like that?
Not that I'm aware. Evan, do you remember any of that with this?
I don't think that's in this lease.
Has there been any agreements for him to purchase the property?
No, sir.
So I guess this went over the last time I heard about this. And matter of fact, I think Adam's the one that told me about it. I guess all those things you told me are nil and void, and we're moving on to a 3-year lease. That's good for right now. It's a Band-Aid, that's right.
Yeah, can we go over what y'all went over? I'm not up to speed on that.
I don't. Apparently, correct me if I'm wrong, Purtle wanted to, well, it was, we talked about it at the board meeting. I think the Purtle was we were gonna sell it for $680,000, something like that, to Purtle.
I believe you're talking about an ILA that the city signs with a real estate group to potentially sell that building, getting on some entity coming into the.
And if Purtle didn't build, well, Tom knows about it too. If Purtle didn't build a particular,
Purtle owns the property.
yeah,
Basically what Adam, I think, is referring to,
up to the back door of it,
yeah, so, at any rate, there was a, contingent on a tenant coming in there, and still may, and it's what we talked about when you and I went to lunch, basically. The tenant coming in there, selling the land to the city, excuse me, Blackwater Development, purchasing the land from our firm. Now, what I think this is about is basically, this gives the city about 3 more years to be in stormwater building, and as Adam said, it's a Band-Aid. But like I asked the mayor yesterday on this, if something would come up, we could get out of it earlier, correct? Is that what my understanding is, that there is a.
I believe so.
with the same, with
I
the
just
same.
asked that question, was there negotiations within this
with-
lease?
Not with this though. That was done.
Well, if there's something in there, if there's a clause in there that says we can get out of lease if the property's sold, I mean, it sounds like we're negotiating selling city
Let me make
property.
sure we're clear on
No,
that.
sir, that's two separate things.
This was brought to y'all's attention back in, I wanna say it was the end of last summer / up until the fall.
I remember
And
something.
there was a pretty big, box tenant that was looking at that property right there. And at this point, it's been put on hold. There's the Pearl was looking to move that land if possible. Blackwater couldn't hold it due to what they had agreed upon. That deal was done south of winter, with nothing being negotiated on at this point. That tenant I'm due to meet with again in the 3rd quarter of this year, and we'll see where that goes, if they even choose that particular property again. So, but this particular lease is nothing, they're totally unrelated.
Apples and oranges.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Moving on to C, approve renewal of maintenance agreement with Motorola Solutions for city radio equipment. This is our standard agreement with Motorola for the Laverne Police Department. Any questions on it?
Is the chief here?
No, he's not here. I believe he's in his office right now. Moving on to D, approved donation of real property from Rutherford County. This is property that Rutherford County is donating to the city. It is right off the roundabout. You should see under Exhibit A in your packet a map with it. I believe this is, go back over here, how many? I think it's about 1.5 acres if I'm remembering correctly. And pretty much the county is donating it to us. The only contingency is that, of course, we cannot turn around and sell it for commercial use. It's for city use. Any questions?
Is that something we could use in the dog park area or no?
This is on the roundabout.
Is it too far down?
It is between East Near Shriveman and Stones River Road, right there on the corner. And it's adjacent other property that we already own. This is something that Commissioner David Gammon and Commissioner Cook both helped us to obtain. Moving on to E, approved proposal for Civil and Environmental Consultants Incorporated for professional engineering services for the Public Works Facility. You should see this in your packet from CEC. Any questions?
Mayor, there's been several questions about the Public Works facility. What size building are we projecting to put in that area?
We don't know yet. That's what the engineering is for.
Okay. So we don't have any estimates or ideas or anything?
We don't have a guesstimate, no, sir.
And are we planning on putting one Public Works facility on that acreage, or is it gonna be multiple city buildings?
Currently, it's just like it states, this is for a Public Works facility.
But obviously, if we're doing engineering and we have future growth in that area to build multiple buildings, it will be within this scope.
Well,
They're just not gonna go in and say.
Well, this scope is specifically for Public Works facility. It's stated in that, so that would be the scope.
But we don't know what size buildings or anything?
No, that's what this would be for us to determine that.
Okay, thank you.
Moving on to F. Approve change order number 1, final for the Mcfarland Elevated Water Storage Tank Improvements Project. Ms. Jamie.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Aldermen. This change order number 1 is the final adjusting change order to establish the final contract price for the Mcfarland Water Storage Tank Improvements Project. This change order will reduce the construction contract amount by $49,995. Part of this deduction is reflective of the actual quantities that were installed based on the estimated bid quantities and allowances in their original bid form. It also includes a deductive amount to cover some incurred costs to the city due to the contractor's delays on this project. Additionally, this charge adjusts the contract times to the actual dates of substantial and final completion, again, to be able to close out the project. The contractor has agreed to this change order, and Gregg and Maloney recommends approval of this change order. Do you guys have any questions?
And in this situation, we're saving money.
Yes, sir.
That's always a good thing.
I didn't think you would be sad about that.
That's great management of the project.
And I talked to several residents out there. They're very happy with the work that was done.
Great.
Yeah, we had a lot of positives on the whole thing.
Sorry it took a little while to get them wrapped up, but I think overall the contractor did a nice job.
Wonderful.
Any other questions? G, approve amendment number 2 for the agreement with Gregg and Maloney for the Mcfarland Tank Improvement Projects.
So I guess I'm going to spend a little of your money.
See, this is pretty good, though. You saved some here, and now you're asking for more.
But I'm not spending more than what you saved. So we are respectfully requesting an amendment for our services due to some additional engineering upfront and the additional oversight for the delays that were experienced. As I mentioned, this has been deducted from the contractor's amount to cover these so that this does not come directly from the city. So I guess, are there any other questions on that?
Any questions?
No, but I would like to say I appreciate the collaboration between the contractor and you and the city's cooperation to make that all happen and still save the tax dollars money, the citizens' tax dollars.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jamie. Moving on to new business, Resolution 2020-06, a resolution to write off Water Department bad debts. This is 2017 old water debt totaling $194,974.13. I would encourage you all to have a look through here. Make sure you review it. If you know anyone, definitely have them reach out to the water billing department. I know I personally have found several and referred them back over for them to have some conversations with.
How did that work out for them?
Well, I've done that a couple times over this year and last year and the year before, and they've gotten payments from some people, some they don't.
Because there's several on there, just like the last time, and there's a part of me that wants to say something, and then there's a part of me. But I would like to know, how does some of those names that get on there, how does that bill get up so high? Like, there's some on there for $1,500 and something. I mean,
Usage?
for 1 month?
It could be several months, it could be that they had a leak, it could be they abandoned the property and someone vandalized, the water system or, used it. Most of the time, whenever we have someone that walks away, if they're in some kind of financial distress, that, their bill could be up to 3 or 4 months.
And if they ever come back to Laverne, or if they're still here, they can never, if they try to get their name on something, we got records of it and stuff.
Correct. Whenever we have a new customer apply for service, we always go through our history to make sure that they haven't lived in the city of Laverne before.
But there is a couple on there, and but,
Spent yesterday
A lot
reaching
of
out to
times-
several.
I just,
A lot of times is they don't leave us a forwarding address, and so if you know of a forwarding address, that would help us a lot.
Pretty aggressive in their, pretty aggressive in your collection attempts. And also, well, that's before it even goes to the collection agency,
Yeah,
so.
these have already been turned over to Fox Collections.
But if you guys can collect, go for it.
Any other questions?
that's it.
Okay. Moving on to appoint or remove board or committee members. First up, we have Construction Board of Adjustment Appeals. We've got one term that expired January 31st, 2020. We do have an applicant, Mr. John Rutledge. This has been advertised on Channel 3. If we get any more applications, they will be included in with the packets on Tuesday. Moving on to B, Historical Preservation Advisory Committee, one term vacant. Currently do not have any applications for this. If we have not received any by Tuesday, this will be removed from the agenda. Moving on to Laverne Housing Authority, one term vacant, and we currently don't have any applications. So again, if we do not have anyone for this on Tuesday, then that will be removed from the agenda. Local Emergency Planning Committee, we've got 3 terms vacant. We've got Laverne Fire Department, we've got Rutherford County EMA, and then we have Stormwater. Chris Clark is being recommended for the RCEMA position, and then waiting on the fire department and stormwater positions until those new employees are in place. And then we've got E, Planning Commission, one term vacant. Mr. Jimmy Favorman has moved outside of the city, so he has resigned, and we have 2 applicants for this, John Rutledge and Diane Sanders. I will appoint one of the 2 of them Tuesday night, and if we get any more applicants, that will be added on here. And then last but not least, this is just an FYI, Economic Development Advisory Committee. We've got one term vacant. That would be Eric Tudobaney, and we will reach out to him to see if he wants to remain on this board or not. But that's just an FYI. It will not be on the agenda for Tuesday night's meeting. With that, moving on to mayor and alderman comments. Alderman Church.
I got a question, just out of curiosity about something, one of these. I talked to somebody on the Laverne Housing Authority. They'd been on it for 8 years, and they've had 1 meeting.
I know
Would
it's
that
been
be-
around for a long time.
Would that be accurate?
For whatever reason, it's never met under any of the prior mayors. We went ahead and got that started, and so they did meet, and I believe they're setting up a schedule for they've had 2 meetings, and then they're going forward from there.
Okay, I was just
Yep.
curious.
So, mayor and alderman comments, Alderman Church.
The important thing is to welcome our new fire chief, to the community. I'm sure he'll have a changing environment, leaving such a large department. But we'll welcome him with open arms. This COVID-19 has really affected a lot of citizens in Laverne, both mentally and financially. On these water bills and things like that, hopefully we have something in place if someone's struggling financially, that we don't shut their water off. There seem to have been from what I've noticed, our water department's working really, really hard with people right now to meet their needs. My statement earlier about our fire system, our fire department, and what they can do, hands down, they're one of the best fire departments in the state, probably the Southeast. I want to remind this board, it's our responsibility as elected officials is to make sure we give them the tools, the necessary tools and equipment that they need. You know, you get swamped with builders when you bring up sprinklers to try to save lives. And they have a legitimate complaint, 5% increase it's not a lot of money, but it is a lot of money in a economic situation that we're in. So I understand the developers and the builders' concerns. So that puts more pressure on this board we need to work a little bit harder on getting the necessary buildings in place, adding that fourth fire station. Maybe not build an $8 million fire hall, or even discuss that right now. Maybe we build two $2 million fire halls, and bring in some equipment to have that fourth station. But the homes are getting bigger in Laverne. We have some rezoning things that are coming up. I'd like to present 75 names on paper to our city attorney, so if the citizens hear that, make sure I got your names and addresses. When things are wants and needs in this city, people come in and lobby for it. So the citizens, hopefully will wake up and understand, it's time to push back and fight back to get your voice heard. That's all I have. Thank you.
Alderman No.
I got nothing.
Okay, thank you. Alderman Jones.
Everyone be careful.
Vice Mayor.
I'd like to say thank you for all of our city employees that are working really hard throughout this COVID. I know a lot of our employees are on the front lines talking to people and interacting with people all the time, police and fire, for instance, but also our water department, sewer department, everyone's still, the city doesn't shut down just because there is a virus out, and so I really appreciate the extra effort. There's a lot of PPE now that's required that 2 months ago we probably didn't even think about that much. So I appreciate everybody's cooperation and your willingness to help our community keep running, and that's one of the reasons why I really strongly recommended to the board that they consider continuing the cost of living increases that they have enjoyed in the previous years. Definitely our cost of living has gone up. And that is not an increase for any of these board members, just so you know. That is just for our city employees. Further, I would just like to remind the board, it is your responsibility to request funding for departments, for personnel and for funding in the budget, which is being discussed right now. So if you're not happy with the current funding level, now is the time to bring that to everyone's attention so that you can have those items funded. If it's not in the current budget and you have not requested it, you have no one to blame but yourself if you don't like the way the budget is drafted. And with that, I will conclude my statement.
Thank you. Well, first I want to welcome our new fire chief, as announced today, Ronnie Beasley, who will be joining us from Memphis, Tennessee, and should be joining us towards the end of June. Want to let everyone know that a drive-through service for the Laverne Library will be starting, and if you keep an eye on both the Laverne Library Facebook page and website on the city's website, webpage on the city's website, you'll find out more information on that. Want to thank Laura Davidson with Box 100, as well as Alderman Jones, for joining me on Saturday. We handed out several thousand masks to people as they drove through. We still have a lot of masks for people. If you need one, want one, please feel free to come to the drive-thru at City Hall. We will gladly give you some. If you can't get out please feel free to contact City Hall. I'll personally bring one out to you. Just want to kind of state this out there, but we all work for the people. We work together. We look for the betterment of Laverne, and we all have different visions of what that is. And as a group, we work together. It's not an adversarial role between us and the residents. It's not a fighting back and fighting against. We're here to work together for the betterment of Laverne going forward. So I'm hoping everyone will work together, make your voices heard. It's very simple. Contact us, whether it's by phone, email, social media. There's multiple ways. Always feel free to reach out. With that, call this meeting adjourned.